Chapter 2. Maternity. The office of maternity is peculiarly that of woman, and is the highest and holiest to which she can aspire. Its attainment requires many sacrifices which she is ever ready to make, and she considers herself amply repaid for the pains and perils she has to undergo when she clasps to her breast her newborn babe, the culmination of her anxiety, the central object of her affections, to her crowning blessing of earth. Maternity is a legitimate object of women's existence, to be attained only through the exercise of a certain function which, for the welfare of society, is not to be indulged outside of the marriage institution. For this reason, if for no other, the parties to a marriage contract should study the law of adaptation. Each party should possess good health, be free from any hereditary taint, and be by disposition prepared to reciprocate the love of each other. To love and to be loved, to forgive and be forgiven, is essential to the happiness of both. Philoprogenitiveness, or love of offspring, is a faculty that renders children the richest treasure of their parents, and casts into the shade all the toil and expense they cause, and lacerates them with bitter pangs when death or distance tears them asunder. It is much larger in women than in man. The father may love his children earnestly, ardently, but it is different from the love of the mother. His affection may be turned away from them, but the love of the mother endureth to the end. The intensity of a mother's love is manifested in the sacrifices she makes to secure her child's happiness. Perhaps, forsaken by the father of her babe, she struggles on alone in the world, careless alike of frowns and hardships, only intent upon its welfare. Dying, her last prayer is for her child. She deprives herself of innumerable pleasures, forgoes the enjoyments of society, assumes the risk of unknown dangers, endures the pains of childbirth, many times suffering from the earliest period of gestation until long after delivery, to attain the joys of motherhood. Maternity begins with conception and ends only with the grave. Maternal instincts may exist in early life and in the barren, but she must pass through the process of gestation and undergo the ordeal of delivery. She must, in a word, become a mother before she can fully realize what maternity means. The adaptability of the female to the requirements of this important office is manifested very early in life, in childhood. While the boy plays with his ball, his horse, and gun, manifests ambition, courage, power, exhibiting his aspirations to manhood, the little girl plays with her doll, imitating the matron, and by word and act indicates her wishes for a real baby long before she can possibly realize, even in the slightest degree, the difficulties and dangers the gratification of her desires imply. Though it is through sexuality that maternity is to be attained, the maternal instinct is entirely distinct from the sexual impulse, and the realization of maternity is often experienced without any knowledge whatever of sexual gratification on the part of the mother. Professor Laycock says, "Maternity is the first and fundamental duty of the female. The male never, in a single instance, in any organism, contributes nutrient material." Madame Curie says, "Those women who comprehend their rights and duties as mothers of families certainly cannot complain of their destiny." The office of maternity is respected the world over. In ancient Rome, the house of the newly made mother was designated by the suspension of wreaths over the door to prevent intrusion and as a mark of reverence. To encourage this holy office, various countries have legislated in its favor, and pensions have been awarded to women who have borne many children. All women are not fitted for the duties and responsibilities of this holy office. There are a variety of circumstances that should be considered in contemplating maternity. When one or both parents are suffering from diseases that influence primarily their vitality and are liable to be transmitted to their progeny, they have no right to bring beings into the world who must perpetuate the parents' misery by a life of continual suffering. Diseases or infirmities which threaten directly the physical or moral life of the individual are propagated above all by generation. The different forms of mania are liable to be aggravated by genital transmission. Epilepsy is liable to degenerate into cerebral maladies in the offspring. Consumption perpetuates itself in the race and may become contagious for the other parent. Uncured syphilis is transmitted through several generations. Scrofula, unless opposed by an excellent vital condition in one parent, will be intensified in the children. Improper temperamental alliances often develop disease among children where it had not been manifested in the parents. We should seek in marriage to neutralize by opposing constitutions, temperaments, and predispositions the morbid hereditary elements which may be found in husband and wife. Marriage alliances should never be contracted between two persons who are essentially the same in temperament, who are lymphatic and scrofulous, nervous, phthisical, etc. We should seek to oppose the disability of one parent by a strong constitution in the other. When matrimonial contracts are formed, contrary to the above rules, the wife should sacrifice her maternal desires for the welfare of the being she would otherwise bring into the world, lest she entail upon the prospective object of affection a life of continuous misery. Among the lower animals, the most studious care is taken to breed only from the very best quality of stock. Quantity is sacrificed to quality, and is the welfare of the human race less important? We contend that no parents have a right to beget more children than they can comfortably support, and we appeal to the nobler sentiments of our fellow men in support of our position. We assert that it is the privilege of every woman to control her maternal function, to say when she shall have children and how many. It does not follow because she is married that she shall be robbed of her health and every enjoyment in life in compliance to the sexual behests of her companion, and no man of feeling, sense, or decency will be willing to see the health, the beauty, and the enjoyment of his wife sacrificed to excessive childbearing. A host of writers, medical and non-medical, are arrayed against the subjection of woman to the infamous laws of modern civilization, which are too often upheld by religion. By the laws of our country, it is a criminal offense to procure, or aid in procuring, or to instruct any woman by what means she can regulate the number of her offspring by preventing conception. Under this law, she must beget children, even though she knows they must suffer and die of some hereditary malady. Under this law, she must beget children and bring them up in poverty, and subject them to starvation, vice, and crime. But one alternative is left, and that is the criminal one of fiticide, or child murder. Indeed, this law demands that she sacrifice health, happiness, principle, and even life in obedience to the demands of this most infamous enactment, in the passage of which she has not even a minority vote. Could the one single law of Providence governing reproduction be suspended or reversed, and every man be compelled to have just one child, even though they might have the benefit of the following rules, the first act of our next legislature would be the repeal of this obnoxious law, and every man would provide himself with a preventative. The distinguished writer, John Stuart Mill, says, "It is strange that the intemperance in drink or any other appetite should be condemned so readily, when incontinence in this respect should always meet not only with indulgence but praise. Little improvement can be expected in morality until the producing two large families is regarded with the same feeling as drunkenness or any other physical excess." The eminent Rasiborski, in taking the position that avoidance of offspring to a certain extent is not only legitimate, but should be recommended as a measure of good, says, "We know how bitterly we shall be attacked for promulgating this doctrine, but if our ideas only render to society the services we expect of them, we shall have effaced from the list of crimes one of the most atrocious, without exception, that of child murder, before or after birth, and we shall have poured a little happiness into the bosoms of despairing families, where poverty is allied to the knowledge that offspring can be born only to prostitution and mendacity. The realization of such hopes will console us under the attacks upon our doctrines." Dr. Edward Reich says, "After reviewing the multitudinous evils which result to individuals and society from the too rapid increase of families, it is much to be wished that the functions of reproduction be placed under the dominion of the will." Dr. Nafis remarks, "Men are very ready to find an excuse for self-indulgence, and if they cannot get one anywhere else, they seek it in religion. They tell woman it is her duty to bear all the children she can." In his work on Fecundity, Fertility, and Sterility, Dr. Duncan, in considering the subject of the size of families, says, Neither the arguments of Malthus nor any others apparently justify us in calling on a healthy couple to limit the number of their children when they will receive a fair education and such an outfit as will enable them to produce so much wealth by their labors as will probably insure them against want. It may well be doubted whether for the sake of self-indulgence and with a little more wealth, such a couple would be justified in placing a limit to the number of their children. But think of another and too frequent case. Think of a man and woman struggling with poverty, absolute or relative, with more children already than they know how to educate, to clothe, even to feed. Think of the woman bowed with ill health, peevish from petty trials. Think of the children, each on its arrival regarded as a misfortune, if not a curse, growing up unhealthy, ill cared for, dirty, ignorant, with no better prospect than to repeat the life of its wretched parents. Would these parents do wrong in refusing to be instrumental in multiplying a race of paupers? Between these two extremes, may not each man and woman ask themselves the question whether any duty obliges them to procreate children whose advent they will deplore? Some may be shocked, even at the question regarding the births of children as the special intervention of Providence. We shall not quarrel with these persons, remembering what are the faculties and possible destiny of each child born, but we cannot refuse to see that Providence will not send children without some action on our part. There is no obligation binding on men and women to begin the begetting of children. Having begun, must they go on perforce? The argument as to interfacing with Providence is quite disregarded now as to epidemics, and it is a little difficult to see the distinction between interfering to prevent excessive deaths and excessive births. Indeed, if we disturb the old balance by preventing a high death rate, it seems almost incumbent on us to restore the equilibrium by diminishing the birth rate. It seems a strange doctrine that we, with our privilege of free will, with reason, with religion for our guides, shall be debarred from all choice in this matter, and be reduced to the level of brute beasts, each species of which is limited by death and suffering alone. We wholly disagree with those who indulge their senses and expect Providence to protect them from the consequences of their incontinence. I am convinced from careful study and extensive research that society or population would not suffer if the act of generation was wholly under the dominion of the will, for there are as many sterile women who desire children as there are fertile ones who wish to avoid them. The force of this observation is more apparent when we assert that in about 95% of cases of sterility, the barrenness is caused by diseases and may be corrected. The intelligent and impartial consideration of the subject is necessary, and should be taught rudimentally in our schools, even though it were advisable to establish special schools for the purpose. The law against preventing conception does not regulate the number of illegitimate children, nor diminish prostitution, for if the fear of conception is the only barrier the law opposes to the unlawful indulgence of sexual propensities, it is too feeble to merit a moment's thought. The immoral care nothing for it, while on the other hand wives who cannot resist or evade the responsibilities are often compelled to beget offspring under circumstances of the most lamentable and cruel kind. Had woman the possession of herself and the control of her maternal functions and duties, instead of grievous sufferings and privations, she would have health and beauty, not only of her own organization, but she would become the mother of all, equally vigorous and lovely. Surely nothing is more wicked than to bring into the world such numbers of helpless and innocent beings, to doom them to poverty, ignorance, and crime, because of their parents' inability to make the necessary provision for them. Pancoast. I have no wish nor intent to break any law, nor encourage others to do so, no matter how unjust it may be, but for the sake of the oppressed, I seriously hope the attention of legislators will be given to the matter, that it may receive proper scientific investigation. The influence of the mother over the career of her child is immense, and it should be rightly directed. A noted divine has well said, "To be good mothers of men and women is the greatest thing in all this world," and we will add, the better the mothers, the better the children in every respect. For the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rocks the world. Physical conditions may be cultivated, but the germs must first exist. It is difficult to give other than what we have, or transmit what we do not possess. It is a mistaken notion among many newly married people that they do not want children. Many who have thought thus have had occasion to regret their folly when later in life the wife finds herself permanently sterile or suffering from disease which the unphilosophical and unphysiological methods of preventing conception she has practiced entail. The age of the wife has an important bearing not only upon her health, her fertility and severity of labor, but upon the constitution of her offspring. Every man and woman should possess a plenitude of life before they communicate it to another. The body should have attained its growth for at least a year, and every function be fully and perfectly established. After puberty, the pelvis of the female undergoes important anatomical changes to fit her for childbearing. These changes require time, several years, and it is not until they are completed that she is fully qualified to perform her part in the process of reproduction. Comparisons of the skeletons of males and females after puberty show a marked difference in their relative breadth and depth, that of the woman being greatest for two reasons: the accommodation of certain organs which are peculiar to her alone, and the easy expulsion of the fetus when conception is completed. The age at which this pelvic difference matures varies from 20 to 25, and conjugal unions should not, on average, be formed prior to the earliest period indicated. Between 25 and 30 is the period of greatest fertility, and first confinements between these ages are least difficult and dangerous. Aristotle observed, "To the female sex, premature wedlock is particularly dangerous, since in consequence of anticipating the demands of nature, many of them suffer greatly in childbirth and are liable to produce imperfect offspring." His observations are fully confirmed by writers of the present day. The children of such marriages are sickly, puny, and defective in mind and body. They inherit more readily the defects of their ancestors, and as a rule die at earlier years than the progeny of better-timed unions. Dr. Nafi says, "A too youthful wife finds marriage not a pleasure but a pain. Her nervous system is prostrated by it. She is more liable to weaknesses and diseases of the womb, and if of a consumptive family, she runs a great risk of finding that fatal malady manifested after a year or two of married life. It is very common for those who marry young to die young." Admitting that there are many exceptions to this rule, it is no argument in favor of early marriages, because there is nothing to be gained except in rare instances. It has been argued in favor of early marriages that uterine diseases in young girls are sometimes cured by it. The risk is too great, for in every case where one has benefited, hundreds have been made worse. My own observations of the results of early marriages conform to the foregoing. Many mothers have suffered from uterine and nervous diseases while their children have possessed puny constitutions. On the other hand, marriages late in life are equally objectionable. Barrenness is more frequent after 30, while the first labors after that age are apt to be more protracted and dangerous. The farther this period has passed, the more rare first births become, and at 46, the childbearing period of a woman ceases entirely, though some notable exceptions have been known. The occurrence of pregnancy occasions peculiar changes in the mental and physical condition of the prospective mother. The menstrual function is suspended, and profound impression is made upon the nervous system. Changes in the breasts occur, the appetite is often changed and becomes peculiar or even depraved. There may be unnatural longings for certain articles of food, salivation, heartburn, palpitation, pains in various parts of the body, etc. Mental peculiarities develop. The pleasant, confiding, gentle, gay, loving woman becomes hasty, passionate, jealous, and bitter. Sometimes those who are naturally bad-tempered become much more pleasant. During the first 2 months, the abdomen is less prominent than natural, and may even continue so until after quickening. But after this time, it steadily increases until delivery. One of the most annoying symptoms of gestation is morning sickness. In some instances, it becomes so severe as to seriously endanger life. It has been an old axiom that a sick pregnancy is always a safe one, and that the absence of nausea and vomiting foreboded danger to the mother or child. For my own part, I cannot understand why a condition so extremely unpleasant is a healthful one, nor can I understand why a condition of the stomach that is pathological to a non-pregnant woman should be physiological to a pregnant one. My own observation does not coincide with the time-honored proverb, and I prefer to believe that nausea and vomiting depend upon conditions that is not only desirable, but proper to relieve. In a large percent of cases that are so severe as to require professional attention, it is evident that in the early stages of the irritability of the stomach, it is propagated to the stomach through the sympathetic nervous system, from the uterus and its appendages. Anything that renders the nervous system weak and irritable is capable of producing this condition. Experience has proved that remedies addressed to the stomach for the vomiting of pregnant women are generally futile, while remedies addressed to the nervous system succeed. The application of a small quantity of chloroform over the pit of the stomach lessens, for a time suspends the irritability of the gastric nerves and controls the vomiting. The injection of a strong solution of bromide of potassium into the rectum allays the irritability at its source and relieves its remote influence. The dose for the purpose should not be less than a dram and an ounce of warm water. Where the sympathetic vomiting has set up an actual inflammation of the stomach, then it will be necessary to address remedies to the stomach as well as to the nervous system. We have already referred to the influence of the mother upon the health and character of the child, and it will not be out of place if we briefly consider the subject of mothers' marks and beautiful children. Although there is a great diversity of opinion about how mothers' marks are produced, yet the very fact that they do exist is evidence that there must be some cause. We will no doubt always be confronted with instances in which these marks cannot be traced to any assignable cause, and on the other hand, assignable causes will have proved inoperative. The profession has very generally conceded that the mind is capable of producing certain diseases in various organs, and that it has been instrumental in curing such diseases when they have existed. Admitting this fact, together with the hereditary transmissibility of disease, we can understand how these marks are produced. Some writers have urged that there is no nervous communication between mother and child. While we do not debate this point, we are certain there is a direct communication through the blood, which is sufficient. Were we to leave sympathy entirely out of the question, and if one quality may be transmitted through this medium, why may not others? No one will attempt to deny that during pregnancy the mother is unusually susceptible to external impressions, and in view of the accumulated evidence, we regard it safe to state that any external circumstance that is capable of making a profound or prolonged impression on the mother may, through the blood or sympathy, affect the child in utero. We might bring forward numerous instances to substantiate our views, but we regard them as entirely unnecessary. Every neighborhood has its examples. The prospective being is really a part of the mother herself, and will be subject to a very great extent at least to the same influences. A practical conclusion suggested by this consideration is to remove the prospective mother as far as possible from the operation of those influences that may make unfavorable impressions upon the fragile structure of the unborn, and surround her with such influences as create a healthful, cheerful, and agreeable state of the mind. This should be remembered by husband, attendants, associates, and all who are brought in contact with her. The mind should be agreeably occupied. Refinement, pure emotions, noble sentiments, equanimity should be cultivated together with everything that contributes to good nature, enjoyment, and serenity. Avoid the presence of unsightly and disagreeable objects, and as quickly and quietly as possible divert the mind from them. Gratify unnatural longings as far as is consistent with reason and circumstance, and thus terminate their influence. Do not worry yourself about something you cannot help, nor anticipate trouble that may never come to pass. Cultivate control over the will. Dismiss unpleasant thoughts and unreasonable fancies as quickly as possible. Think of something else. Do not listen to the horrible and terrifying stories which neighbors' gossip delight to tell, nor be kept in a state of terror and anxiety about the termination of the conception by the yarns of those meddlesome old grannies who are always acquainted with some case that was just like yours and something happened. Every community is unfortunately cursed by such busybodies. Heed them not. They are no more capable of judging your condition or predicting the future than they are to be president, and their tales are nearly always imaginary. Contemplate grace and beauty, and by such a course you will not only likely to avoid mother's marks, but beget healthful, talented, beautiful children. Cultivation of mental qualities is worthy of an effort. If it is desired that the unborn excel in some branch of learning or profession, let the mother exercise her mind in that direction. In a word, keep the mind free from unpleasant subjects, unhappiness, anger, anxiety, etc., but filled with agreeable fancies and charming images. Cultivate graceful attitudes, remembering that her course now must be reflected in the future character of her unborn babe. The ancient Greeks surrounded pregnant women with statuary, paintings, and engravings, and with good results. It is well known that artificial feeding is one of the fruitful causes of infant mortality. Consequently, when no physical condition exists to prevent it, every mother should nurse her own child. With birth, the cares of maternity are increased, and the obligation is imposed upon the mother of nourishing the little being she has brought into the world. Science has pointed out that it contributes to her physical welfare, and is to most mothers one of the pleasures of maternity. I do not, however, wish to be understood as advising all women to nurse their children. Many women cannot supply milk of the proper quality, and while they might be benefited by nursing, under such circumstances it would be extremely detrimental, if not absolutely destructive, to the child.